My name is Jesse Allen. I am a musician slash songwriter slash multimedia artist from Galesburg, Illinois, USA. And today I'll be talking about microphones. There are many different kinds of microphones, but as a musician, the two types of mics you're most likely to deal with are going to be dynamic mics and condenser mics. Now this mic here is a Shure SM48S. It's a dynamic mic. It's your pretty much industry standard vocal mic. And as you might be able to see, it's got some, dents and dings there. However, it still works and sounds just as good as the day I bought it about 7 or 8 years ago. And that's a big advantage with dynamic mics. They tend to be built more rugged and could take a little more wear and tear and abuse. They're primarily meant for live on-stage performance, so naturally in the course of a show they're going to get dropped, they're going to get knocked over, so they need to be sturdy. As I mentioned before, this is pretty much an industry standard vocal mic. And one thing you got to be aware of when it comes to microphones is all of them will have their own unique frequency response. They're going to pick up certain sounds and pitches better than others. And with this particular mic, the frequency response picks up the most, around the human vocal range, and then it drops off severely at the very, low end and the very high end of where human vocals are supposed to be. Another important characteristic of microphones is their polarity pattern, and that is simply what area around the mic is going to pick up sound the best. Now, this microphone, like a lot of dynamic microphones, has a directional, or what's known as a cardioid polar pattern. So the cardioid pattern, if you look at the drawing, the graphic, looks a little bit, some say like a heart. I like to think it looks, a bit more like a mushroom cloud, but basically all it's saying is, that this mic is going to pick up, what's, around this kind of area. So it's meant to be held in the hand and sing, like this, and pick up what's coming from me, but it won't pick up all the sound from the monitors and, anything behind it, which is going to cause a lot of feedback. Now this mic here is an MXL 4000, and it's a large diaphragm condenser mic. And there are a few important differences between condenser mics and dynamic mics. For one thing, this mic is a lot more sensitive and a lot more fragile, and you don't want to be just banging it around like you would a dynamic mic. It's not going to take that kind of abuse. Another big difference with this mic is its frequency response. The microphone I showed you earlier was meant to be a vocal mic, so it's going to pick up frequencies within the human vocal range better. This, on the other hand, has a bit of a flat frequency response, which means it'll pretty much pick up any sound that the human ear can hear and pick it up pretty equally. So it's pretty much a what you hear is what you get mic. Now another huge difference between dynamic mics and condenser mics is that condenser mics usually require some sort of outside source of power. It's sometimes referred to as plus 48 volts or phantom power. And it's usually provided via the audio interface you're using or the mixer board or preamp that you might be using. Another big difference between this mic and the vocal mic that I showed you earlier is the polarity patterns. Now dynamic mics, they tend to be directional and tend to be cardioid polar patterns. Not always, but that's usually the case. Condenser mics usually have more options. Like, for instance, there's the omnidirectional polar pattern, which will pretty much pick up everything in the room equally from all around the mic. And then there's also figure 8 patterns and they will also do, directional or cardioid patterns as well. Some of the higher end ones, like this one, actually has a switch where you can switch between different polar patterns for different recording situations, and that's a nice feature to have. And that concludes my discussion today on microphones. A few things to remember or keep in mind: that your dynamic microphones, because of how rugged they are and they're usually more directional in nature, tend to be better for live stage performances, whereas your condenser mics, because of their more delicate and fragile nature and because of how sensitive they are better for usually more controlled, studio recording applications. Thank you.